Let us not forget everything that happens is by the will of Allah. It's time to unite and stand, and we will be the best amongst men. It's not time to be extreme or the unthinkable, but to stand together as one. To Sunnah followers streaming every day, various platforms. Trust me, you'll find a way. Sunnah followers.
Join us for a highly anticipated new series, Heroines of Islam, hosted by lailanasheeba. Allow her to take you through time exploring the lives of these powerful, courageous, spiritual pillars of Islam. Learning about their lives through a lens, unique and explained through a woman's point of view using authentic hadith. Tune in every Monday and Wednesday 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. Right here on Sunnah Followers.
Ina alhamdulillah, wa salat, wa salam ala wa rasulallah. Welcome to our series entitled The Heroines of Islam. And this is the series where, as we discuss the different companions, female companions, namely, that lived during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the reason why I began this series is because so many women, it's a fact, we have a lot of women that convert to Islam every day. But on the other hand, there's a lot of apostasy, a high apostasy rate amongst the women that convert too. And the reason being is because Islam has become so strange today, and women are told things such as that they're not important, they're not special, that there's no place for them in the world except inside the home, having babies and worshiping a man. And this is not Islam. It's not Islam. The reason I started this series was to show the people that nowhere does Allah say because you are a female, you're less than anyone else. Nor does Allah say that because you're a female that you're invisible, that you have no say, no voice, and no importance. Because when you learn the history of Islam, you learn that right behind the men were women. Right behind the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had 11, 12, 13 women that played effective roles in his life. They helped him to establish Islam, as a religion and a way of life. And all of these women were visible. All of these women had a voice. All of these women were seen publicly by others. So that's what made me start teaching this series. So as to tear down the misconceptions that the world today in 2024 has in regards to women in Islam. Women in Islam are just as important as men, okay? And the prohibitions for us, are not. Can somebody mute inside the Zoom room? The prohibitions for us are not as rigid as people and as many as people believe there to be. Okay? From the way we dress to the way we speak to whether we can leave the home, all of this stuff has been experienced by the Prophet's wives, those female companions. They participated on the battlefield. They participated in the hospitals. They participated at home. It's all about knowing what your rights are as a Muslim woman, knowing what your role is as a Muslim woman, and fearing Allah first and foremost. And so today what I'm going to do is one of the new shahadas, the new converts, asked me if I could speak more speak more about the woman who breastfed the Prophet Muhammad, not the first lady, Thumaima. He had two. A lot of Muslims don't know the Prophet was breastfed by two women. The first woman that breastfed him was a woman named Thumaima, and she also breastfed him, Abu Sufyan, Hamza, Abu Salama. That's why they were all brothers too. You know, the Prophet Muhammad, for those of you who don't know, was also the foster brother to Hamza. Hamza was not just his uncle, but a foster brother. Also, Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan wasn't just a cousin. He was also a foster brother to the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, and that was through Thumaima, the first woman that breastfed him. And then the second woman that breastfed the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was Shema's mother. I did for you sisters the story of Shema, who was the sister of the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it was when I did her story that a couple of the new shahadas asked me if I could do the story of her mother. So tonight, inshallah, I'm going to detail the story of Haleemah As Sadiyah, Haleemah As Sadiyah, who was the mother of Shema, and also she was the foster mother of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let me set everything up for you all. Take everything down so you'll be able to take screenshots. And again, as with all the lectures I give, all my classes, because my lectures are not lectures really, they're classes, because I'm a teacher, I'm not a lecturer. Okay, so let me take all the things down. I want you guys to take screenshots of everything, of all my PowerPoint, so that way you can print it out at the end of class, and you'll have it in your notes as the story of Haleemah As Sadiyah. And here it is. This is it. Let me share it to my screen with you guys to the PowerPoint. And for those on Zoom, give me a minute, and now so I can check to make sure ain't nobody on the mic in here. Good, they're not on the mic. And let me share you guys in the Zoom room. How did that happen when I gave myself rights? Hold on for a second. Gave myself rights, and it still happens, huh? Okay. All right, let me go on here. I'm going to share the Zoom people to Instagram, inshallah, if I can. Yeah. Okay, there it is. There should be Instagram. Hopefully it'll get big for you guys. Okay, and let me pop myself back into where I was with the PowerPoint. Okay, I'm going to make this screen larger. Is Instagram, it's not big enough for you guys here. Okay, I'm going to take the people on Instagram, on Zoom room to YouTube to share you. So that way it's large enough. There it is. I guess that's working. Yeah, it should be. Okay, so now let me take it full screen for everyone. So tonight, inshallah, we're going to do the story of Haleemah As Sadiyah. Haleemah As Sadiyah. As Sadiyah. She was the second woman, not the first. She was the second woman who breastfed the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And her story is also a reminder of our Prophet Muhammad and his life story. So let's start it off here. Haleemah tells us in her own words how she ended up becoming the wet nurse for the prophet. First of all, back in the 6th, 7th, 8th century, whenever an Arab woman gave birth to a child, they would not breastfeed them themselves. They had wet nurses they would give the children to. So the wet nurses would take them to the country to live amongst them so that the children could learn the Arabic language. Okay? The Fusha, not the slang that they speak today. Okay? Well, and the women were paid. The women were paid. These women earned their living being wet nurses for other women, mostly women of nobility. If you look at other cultures, the Egyptians, those women did not breastfeed their children either. They would hire wet nurses. Those were the noble women. Even the Romans, the Greeks, the Roman women, if a woman was of nobility, she would pay a wet nurse to nurse the child. So Haleemah tells us that there wasn't any woman amongst them who wasn't offered the choice of nursing the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But when they found out that he was an orphan, they would reject him. And the reason being is because the women were paid by the man. Back in those days, men took care of the family, not women. You were paid by the husband. So when they would find out that he was an orphan, that he had no father, in Islam, any child that has no father is an orphan. The fact that he had no father, no one wanted to nurse him. But Haleemah said, this is how she made her living. Nobody wanted her to nurse their child either, for whatever reasons. So when she failed in getting a baby for herself to nurse, because the children were already chosen by the women before her, she told her husband, she said, I am not going to be the only one who will go back home to the country without a nursling. So I'm going to go ahead and volunteer to take the orphan boy, the orphan baby that nobody wants. And her husband told her, go ahead, take him. And perhaps Allah will bring a blessing or something as a result. So Haleemah tells us she went and gathered the baby Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, the only reason she took him was because she couldn't find any other. All the other kids were picked. And she tells us as soon as she took him and brought him to her donkey, she breastfed him. And the breast just flew from out of her. The milk just flew from out of her breast. She said she never had that much milk before. And her own son, she also had a son of her own who was the same age as the Prophet Muhammad. She said after nursing the little baby Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she also nursed her son. And that was how much milk she had. Her milk was overflowing. So her husband then went to the camel and milked the camel, and they drank the milk before going on their journey. And then they spent the night and they had a good night. And she said, even the camel, her husband told her that night, even when he milked the camel was overflowing with milk. So that morning, her husband told her, he said, Haleemah, I can see that whoever this child belongs to, this child is a blessed child, because never did we have that much milk in the camel before. And look at how much milk you have in your breast. He said, can you imagine the blessings that we may experience with this child? So Haleemah tells us that they then set out and began their journey back to their village in the country. And she said, by Allah, her donkey walked so fast that none of her other women could catch up with it. And everybody was surprised at how fast that donkey was walking. That they asked her, they said, "Is this the same donkey that you had when you left your home?" She said, "Yes." They said, "Well, what happened? The donkey was too slow, but now look how fast it is." So that's how they knew that there was something special about that child. She said, and when they arrived a home, remember, they lived in a home that was barren. The farm that she had was mostly desert sand. Her sheep would graze and couldn't find much grass to eat from. But when she arrived home with that baby, all of a sudden, everything changed. She said her sheep grass appeared all over the place, and her sheep had plenty to eat. And when they would go to milk the sheep, all of her sheep had so much milk that they could give it away. She said her sheep had so much milk that she would even give some to her neighbors. And the other people in the village told her, they said, "Subhanallah, something is going on with your sheep. Our sheep can't find no food. Our sheep don't produce much milk, but yours are." They didn't know what she and her husband knew, that it was all because of this baby that she had taken in that nobody else wanted. So it was the Arabic tradition or culture for the nurse, the wet nurse, to nurse the child until it was 2 years old and then take it back to its mother. She tells us when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam reached the age of 2, they noticed how he was much grown over the other children. He was bigger than they were, taller than they were. His skin was strong and thick, and he was very beautiful. He was a handsome child. And when the time came for her and her husband to take him back to his mother, they were so sad at doing so because this child had been a blessing for them and their family. They didn't want to return him because they didn't want to go back to the lifestyle of poverty that they were experiencing before him. So when they reached Mecca and his mother came to get him, Haleemah tells us they begged her. They said, "Please let him stay with us another year. Let us keep him for another year. We heard that there's a pandemic. There's a pandemic going around in Mecca. Some of the children are getting sick." So they begged his mother, "Let us keep him for another year so that that pandemic won't get him." And they continued begging until she agreed. So they took the little boy back home with them. And then she tells us 2 or 3 months after they had returned back from Mecca, another weird incident occurred. He was playing with his foster brother in the backyard with the sheep. Suddenly, the foster brother ran in the house and said, Umi, that Qurayshi brother of mine, 2 men dressed in white garments came to see him. They grabbed him. They laid him down on the ground on his back and they cut open his stomach. So when their son told them that, they ran outside. She said her and her husband ran outside to see what was going on. And they found the boy Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam standing up, and his face was a strange color. So her husband asked, "What happened, my son? What happened?" And the prophet told them, 2 men dressed in white came to me. They laid me on the ground and cut open my stomach, and they removed something and took it away. Then they sewed me back up. So Haleemah then tells us they took him in the house, calmed him down. And her husband became nervous. Her husband said, Haleemah, do you think that perhaps the jinn has possessed him? Because this is before Islam. Before Islam, guys, the Arabs were very superstitious. Whenever something strange happened, they were quick to blame it on the jinn. So the way the prophet was acting as a young boy, and by the way, he was around 5 or 6 years old. He was around 5 or 6 years old when this happened. The way he was acting was so strange that it was normal to think it was jinn possession. So her husband said, let's take him back home. Maybe we done kept him too long. We should have returned him when he was 2, but we've kept him too long. Let's take him back before the jinn decide to do something to us. So they gathered up his things and they took him back to Mecca and handed him back to his mother. When his mother saw him coming, she said, why are you bringing him back now? You were doing such a good job taking care of him. And they told her, by Allah, he's okay. It's just that we've paid off our debts and we fear that something bad might happen to him. So that's why we're bringing him back home to you. But his mother didn't believe him. The prophet's mother insisted that they tell her the truth as to why they brought him back. And so finally his mother said, I know why you brought him back. Maybe y'all think that he's touched by a shaitan. Maybe y'all think that a jinn has him or something. Because Amina, who was his mother, she knew that he was a special child. They told her, no, it's not that. Shaitan will never be able to hurt him. They said, shall I tell you something about him? And that's when his mother said, when I was pregnant with him, I never felt like I was carrying anything lighter than him. And I had a dream that a light came out of me, which illuminated the palaces of Syria. And when I gave birth to him, I didn't go through any pain. She said, so I know my child is special. I know he's not touched by a jinn. I know that he's just special. So leave him with me and you can go on about your way. So that's how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went from living with Haleemah for 5 years when he should have been returned when he was 2. But they kept him because of all the good fortune that came their way. But after hearing what happened with him with these 2 men, they took him home, believing he had been possessed, but his mother knew he was special and kept him. Later on, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that those 2 men that had come to him dressed in white were the angels, the angel Jibril and Michael, the 2 of the greatest of the archangels. They were the ones that came. And of course, what did they cut out of his heart? They cut out of his heart his jinn, because he had reached the age of puberty or was nearing the age of puberty. And that's when your jinn attaches. Okay, so what they did was they cut out his jinn and made his jinn Muslim, and then put the jinn back in his heart and sewed him back together. So, and this is what happens with any prophet of Allah, and there will be no other prophets. The prophets of Allah, their jinns were made Muslim by Allah. So that's why no prophet of Allah is capable of deliberately, intentionally disobeying Allah. So the prophet told us that was the angel Jibril and Michael come to remove his heart and cleanse it so that his jinn would be Muslim and not kafir. So Haleemah had no contact with the Prophet Muhammad after that at all. There's no hadiths, no authentic hadiths or anything that mentions any other contact between them at all until the end of the Battle of Hunain. When the Prophet Muhammad had become a messenger of Allah and was fighting against the Romans of Hunain, that's when the Prophet received goods and some prisoners of war. And a delegation from the Hawazin who had converted to Islam came to visit him. And they said, "O Messenger of Allah, we are a tribal people who have been touched with hardship. Please help us. And may Allah grant you favor." And amongst the captives of this war was Haleemah's daughter, Shema. And I did her story. She was taken as a prisoner of war. She was with the Hawazin. Okay. Those were her people. And she demanded to see the Prophet. And everybody laughed at her because she was an old woman and she kept referring to him as her brother. And that's when they took her to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet said, I can't tell who you are, because she was old. And she said, "You remember when you were a baby, you bit me on my back." She said, "I still have the scar on my back from when you bit me." And that's when the Prophet realized she was his sister Shema, and he hugged her, he kissed her hands. He took his garment off, his cloak off, and had her sit down next to him. And that's when he asked, "How are our parents?" And she told him how they were. And that's when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam let the companions around him know that this is indeed his sister, and that Haleemah, her mother, was his mother, because she fostered him. And by the way, guys, Haleemah converted to Islam. Haleemah, her mother and her father, had become Muslim, and so did all his other foster brothers and sisters. And when the people that were the companions who were with the Prophet found out that she was his aunt, they were shocked. I mean, his sister, they were shocked. And even when her people found out that she was directly related to the leader of the people, the group that they fought against, they said, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, if we had known this, we would have never fought against you. If we had known that you were the foster brother and foster son of Haleemah and her husband, we would have never done this." So the whole tribe, her whole tribe, ended up becoming Muslim. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam helped her people. He told them, "Everything that is for me and the children of Abdul Muttalib is for Allah and for you." He let them know, "I know you guys are going through a hardship. The simple fact that we are related. We are you are a tribe of people related to me through the fostering of Haleemah. Whatever I have is yours." And so the Prophet sent all these people of the Hawazin. He sent them back with gifts and food and money and wealth. He freed all the captives of war. They all converted to Islam. He offered Shema to stay with him. He wanted Shema to go get her mother and father and everybody just stay with him. But Shema said, "No, I'd rather go back with my people, teach Islam. We rather stay amongst our people. We are a simple people. We are people of the desert. We are Bedouin." In other words, they were Bedouins, country. And so they chose to go back. And so that's where the story ends of Haleemah, who was the woman who nursed the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.